For more than a decade, the smartphone world has been controlled by two giants. Android dominates the global market with billions of active devices, while Apple's iPhone continues to command the premium segment with incredible customer loyalty. Together, these platforms have become so powerful that most people assume the smartphone industry is permanently locked into a two-player race. Countless companies have attempted to challenge this duopoly over the years, from Windows Phone to BlackBerry's modern revival efforts, but none have managed to break through. Yet in 2026, a surprising contender is attracting growing attention across the technology world. A new generation of Linux phones is creating excitement among developers, privacy advocates, and tech enthusiasts, leading many to ask a question that once seemed impossible. Should Android actually be worried? At first, the idea sounds strange. Android itself is based on the Linux kernel, so how could a Linux phone threaten Android? The answer lies in philosophy rather than technology. While Android uses Linux at its core, it has evolved into a highly controlled ecosystem dominated by manufacturers, carriers, app stores, and cloud services. Modern Linux phones take a different approach. They embrace openness, customization, transparency, and user control in ways that traditional smartphones often do not. For years, smartphone users have become accustomed to limitations. Devices arrive loaded with pre-installed applications that cannot easily be removed. Operating system updates are controlled by manufacturers. User data is continuously collected and processed. App stores determine which software can be installed and which cannot. Most consumers accept these restrictions because they provide convenience, security, and familiarity. However, a growing number of users are beginning to question whether they are giving up too much control over the devices they use every day. This growing frustration has created an opportunity for Linux phones. Unlike traditional smartphones, many Linux-based devices are designed around the idea that users should truly own their hardware. They offer deeper customization options, greater privacy controls, and access to the underlying operating system. For people who value digital freedom, that approach is extremely appealing. What makes the Linux phone movement especially interesting in 2026 is how much the technology has improved. Early Linux smartphones were often viewed as experimental products. They were exciting for developers but difficult for average users. Battery life was inconsistent, application support was limited, and user interfaces often felt unfinished. Today, the situation is dramatically different. Modern Linux phones feature more polished software, faster hardware, better power management, and significantly improved user experiences. Privacy remains one of their strongest selling points. Every year, concerns about digital surveillance become more widespread. Smartphones have become the most personal devices people own. They know where users go, who they talk to, what they search for, and what they buy. Linux phones appeal to those who want greater visibility into how their data is handled. Instead of relying heavily on cloud-based tracking and analytics, many Linux phone platforms prioritize local processing and transparency. Another reason Linux phones are attracting attention is the growing importance of artificial intelligence. In 2026, AI features are becoming central to the smartphone experience. Voice assistants, intelligent search tools, real-time translation, image generation, and personal AI agents are appearing everywhere. While these technologies offer impressive capabilities, they also raise concerns about privacy and control. Many AI services depend on cloud processing, meaning personal information is sent to remote servers. Linux phone developers see this as an opportunity. By focusing on open-source AI solutions and local processing, they hope to offer powerful features without requiring users to surrender as much personal data. This approach resonates with people who appreciate AI innovation but remain cautious about privacy implications. Developers are also embracing Linux phones because of their flexibility. Traditional smartphone operating systems often restrict system access and advanced customization. Linux phones remove many of these barriers. Developers can access terminal environments, run custom software, modify system components, and experiment in ways that are difficult or impossible on conventional smartphones. For programmers and technology enthusiasts, carrying a Linux-powered device feels less like using an appliance and more like carrying a portable computer. One particularly exciting concept is convergence. The idea is simple but powerful. Connect a Linux phone to a monitor, keyboard and mouse, and it transforms into a desktop computer. Because Linux phones share much of their foundation with desktop Linux systems, they can potentially run similar software and workflows. As smartphone processors become more powerful each year, the distinction between phones and computers continues to blur. This trend could become increasingly important in developing markets where affordability matters. Instead of purchasing both a smartphone and a laptop, some users may eventually rely on a single device capable of serving both roles. Linux phones are uniquely positioned to explore this possibility because of their open architecture and desktop-oriented capabilities. The rise of open-source culture is helping fuel this momentum. Today, millions of people use open-source software without even realizing it. Linux powers servers, cloud infrastructure, supercomputers, networking equipment, and countless internet services. Open-source development has proven that community-driven innovation can compete with and sometimes surpass proprietary alternatives. Linux phones benefit from this same collaborative ecosystem. Of course, Linux phones still face enormous challenges. The biggest obstacle remains application support. Android and iOS have spent years building massive software ecosystems. Consumers expect access to banking apps, messaging platforms, navigation services, entertainment tools, and productivity software. Without reliable access to these applications, widespread adoption becomes difficult. However, technology trends may gradually reduce this disadvantage. More services are moving to the web, allowing users to access them through browsers rather than dedicated apps. Progressive web applications continue improving, and compatibility solutions are becoming more sophisticated. While Linux phones may not yet match Android's app ecosystem, the gap is smaller than it once was. Android itself remains incredibly strong. Google continues investing billions into improving performance, security, AI integration, and user experiences. Manufacturers release new Android devices every year with cutting-edge hardware and features. The platform benefits from a vast developer community and a mature ecosystem that would be extremely difficult to replicate. Yet history teaches an important lesson. Dominant platforms rarely appear vulnerable until significant change is already underway. Technology is filled with examples of companies that seemed untouchable before new competitors emerged. Innovation often begins at the edges of the market before gradually moving toward the mainstream. What makes Linux phones fascinating is not necessarily their current market share. It is the direction they represent. They challenge assumptions about how smartphones should work. They offer alternatives to centralized ecosystems. They give users more control over their devices and data. Even if they remain niche products, they influence conversations throughout the industry. Manufacturers, developers, and consumers are paying closer attention than ever before. The excitement surrounding Linux phones in 2026 feels different from previous years because the technology is finally becoming practical enough to support serious discussion. These are no longer just experimental gadgets for hobbyists. They are increasingly capable devices with real-world potential. Will Linux phones replace Android anytime soon? Almost certainly not. Android's dominance remains overwhelming and its ecosystem advantages are enormous. But disruption is not always about immediate replacement. Sometimes it is about introducing new ideas that gradually reshape an industry. That is exactly why Android should pay attention. Linux phones are proving that there is still demand for openness, privacy, and user freedom in mobile computing. They are showing that consumers are willing to explore alternatives when those alternatives offer something genuinely different. Whether Linux phones eventually become mainstream or remain a passionate niche, they are already accomplishing something important. They are reminding the industry that innovation does not stop once a market appears settled. In 2026, Linux phones may not be threatening Android's dominance directly, but they are creating a conversation that the entire smartphone industry can no longer ignore. And sometimes the beginning of a major shift starts with a conversation that nobody expected to matter,